Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. And I'm your host, Dr. Zhanna. Today, we're going to talk about what to do if you have an unsupported husband. Very juicy topic. You may be married or you're partnered with somebody who is not as optimistic about your practice as you are. You decided to start a practice, or maybe you bought a practice, and maybe they were not supportive from the beginning, or maybe at first he or she supported you wholeheartedly, and now it's been a year and a half, and they're starting to doubt the success of your practice. Or maybe they decided to switch careers, and now suddenly you are the breadwinner, so you're feeling a lot more pressure to bring home the bacon. Or maybe they don't quite agree with some of your decisions. And I see this, it's kind of ironic, right? When our husbands don't actually own a business, but gives us business advice. It's like, what's that expression? The passenger seat driving. Yeah. When the person who's not actually the driver is telling you that. My dad always used to do it. My mom would always drive. She was always the driver. And then my dad would seat at the passenger seat, but constantly tell her what to do. And I'm like, Dad, why don't you just drive? He's like, no, I'm not very comfortable driving. Then why are you giving directions, right? So if you're in any of these situations where you are putting up the fires at work in your practice, and then you're coming home and it almost feels like you have to put out fires at home as well, this episode is for you. And I'm going to give you my 3 best tips on why it bothers you so much. Why is this happening? That, our partners don't support us and it really bothers us. And I'm going to give you a really good tip on how to not let it affect you. And a third tip also on what to do next, and as well as some statistics around that. Okay. So it would be nice in an ideal world, right, that when we decided to start a practice or buy someone else's practice, everybody would be very happy for us and optimistic. And whenever we're experiencing inevitable ups and downs, they're just there cheering for us and just helping us go through this whole journey. That would be amazing, right? But as you probably have noticed, on the entrepreneurial journey, sometimes our closest people actually believe in us the least. It's very interesting how, looking back at the businesses that I have started, some people that I thought would be my biggest cheerleaders are actually not. And other people who I didn't even expect that just came out of woodworks and cheering for me all day, every day, right? So that brings me to the biggest point of the reason why it affects you so much, your husband's reactions or actions, is because you have something that we call in coaching a manual. Okay, I want you to think about a rule book, like you have maybe HR manual, right? Or you have like an instruction guide for how to use a kitchen appliance, right? You have a manual, you have a book of rules. So we all go through life with these book of rules that we learned from, growing up, maybe from our parents, from social media, from the movies we're watching, from school, from just day-to-day interactions. We learned how we are supposed to behave in different situations and what expectations to have from other people, right? All of these things, a lot of them are implied or not like written, like verbal, or just expectations that we have observed and adapted, but they are shaping the lens through which you see your interaction with your husband. That is very important because one problem is that you haven't given him your manual, right? None of us just writes a set of rules and gives it to another person. That would actually be kind of nice. It doesn't mean that they're going to, behave according to this, but it would be nice to know sometimes. Most of the time, We don't give them the rule book, and then we have these expectations that we want them to behave a certain way. And then we use the type of language that really gives us like a punch in the gut. Stuff like, well, isn't that common sense? But isn't that normal? Isn't that what marriage is supposed to be? But we're married, but he's my husband, but she's my wife, but I'm the doctor, right? We have these expectations that are ruining our experience of life. So my tip number one is I want you to recognize, what is your manual for your husband? What does that manual say? Does it say that no matter what kind of day you have, he needs to talk to you and listen to you and hug you and be supportive? Why? It would be nice. Well, but it also can stop you from growing. Do you see what I mean? Sometimes, like, think about if you have kids, right? You don't always want to cuddle them. Like, you don't always want to like step in and be there for them. Sometimes you on purpose challenge them. Think about when you go to the gym. In order for you to develop muscle mass, right, to grow your muscles, you have to challenge them with weights. You don't build muscle by lifting pillows. You have to do hard things. So maybe it's done by design that sometimes we are supposed to go through hard things, and it's not a problem. It's just a fact of life. So I really want you to think about, okay, what are the rule books in my manual for my husband? If I have a bad day, what is he supposed to do? If I'm struggling or trying something new, what is he supposed to say? What does my rule book say? Just don't change it. Just become aware of this. This will already be tremendously helpful for you, because these are the expectations that you have for him, from him. He has the same thing for you too. And when these expectations don't match the reality is when you're in pain. And so if you want to have an exceptional marriage, my suggestion is revisit these expectations. I'm not saying to have no expectations from him. I'm not saying that. I always teach my clients to love their partners unconditionally and have boundaries. But boundaries are for you, meaning boundaries are what you are going to do when he breaks your boundary. And typically boundaries are not things like, oh, he can't say this or he should hug me. Boundaries are something when like there's a violation. Like think about a physical property. If somebody enters your property unannounced, that's a boundary violation. If your neighbors are doing some crazy things in their house and you can see it through the window, that's not a boundary violation, right? They're not necessarily crossing like the physical perimeter of your property. So I really want you to think about, what are these boundaries you have with your husband, and what is the manual? Like, how is that not serving you right now? If it's set to the point where it's literally setting you up for pain and suffering. I don't want that for you. So maybe we don't need him to do certain things. Maybe it's actually best for us and our growth and our practice growth to not expect these things from him. Okay, so that's my tip number one. Figure out what is your manual, and let's just become aware of it and maybe potentially revisit it. My tip number two is, I really want you to spend time thinking, and of course with this episode is going to come a worksheet. So in the show notes below, download the worksheet so you can really dive in deeper into this. But I really want you to spend some time thinking, why did you decide to start or buy this practice? Like really go 3 layers deeper. This is really important, because from now on that you hear this episode, I don't want you to do anything that you haven't decided for you. Even if it seems like you're doing it for other people, always return it back to you. I started this practice. Why? So I can support my family. Why? So that I can feel strong. So I can feel proud as a wife, proud as a mom. So I can feel like I fulfilled my potential. Always bring it back to yourself. And I really want you to spend some time. It's incredible the number of times I speak with people, with clients, with doctors on calls, and I ask them, so why did you decide to start this practice? And they don't have an answer. They don't have a very concrete, solid answer. Sometimes answers are like, well, there were no other employments, like, so I just had to start my practice. Or I just hated being an associate and I tried different offices and I could never find a good one, so I just started my practice. Or, well, that's ultimately like the hardest thing to do, like the final feather in some sort of cap, um, that I decided, so I decided to start a practice. Notice how these reasons for starting practice don't have a deep emotional weight inside of your soul. They will not pull you out when things get hard. And I want you to find the deep reason for you, not for anybody else, for you. Why do you want to have the practice? And whenever your husband's words or behavior clash with your manual, then you recognize it's a manual, but it's going to be so much easier to not pay attention and let go of that and focus on your why and create the emotional experience that you want. Because in the reality, and that kind of brings me to the point of statistics, what you are doing is truly remarkable. I don't know if you knew, but I pulled up some data, and feel free to Google it. But did you know that out of all of the women business owners in the United States that own some type of healthcare business, right? Healthcare, like top, they're making more money than, some other businesses. But amongst all of the women-owned healthcare businesses in the United States, only 4 to 6% of women owners make over $300,000 in revenue per year. 4 to 6%. It was like 4 to 5.7%. Make $300K and more. So if you're making at least $300K, my friend, you're in like a top 4%. That is outstanding. Wow. What an accomplishment. Do you realize that? The weight of it? And if your practice is making at least $1 million, you're in the top 2%. 2 to 4% of female-owned healthcare businesses in the United States gross $1 million or more. That is like, just literally pause and let it sink in. It's absolutely incredible what you do. And I want you to remind yourself of this every single day. Bookmark this podcast if you need to, come back to it. Listen to it over and over again. But what you are doing, even on your worst day, you are one of the most successful women in this country. What? This is insane. So let him be unsupportive. Let him criticize your choices. Let him question whether it's going to work out. You're already winning, my friend. Huge. And the last thing I want to tell you is that sometimes what he says or does may drive you crazy, and it may seem unfair. You may think, gosh, like, should we go to therapy? Couples, like, what is going on? Do I have to get a divorce? Like, why is he so difficult? And I always like to remind my clients that adults get to behave however they want. Children also behave however they want, but we have more control over them. But when it comes to adults, really, I don't even want to try. I don't even encourage you to try and control adults. Think about it, how hard it is to control your own behavior. Sometimes we want to lose weight, want to go to the gym. We can't make ourselves go to the gym, right? It's hard to control our own behavior, let alone other people's. So let him do whatever he does. If he's not breaking your boundaries, let's just love him for who he is. we're doing something extremely incredible. So let's focus on why we have this practice and toot our own horn. And what I recommend is that you find a tribe. It could be a tribe somewhere in your area. It could be a tribe online. You can join the my mastermind, or just have resources, books, or podcasts that help you stay on that vibration of or that wavelength of the incredible thing that you're doing by growing this business, because that's exactly what you're doing. So I hope this was very helpful, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.